Hi there. Welcome to True Crime Cochise, the Herald Review's True Crime podcast. I'm Managing Editor Matt Hickman and joined by courts and crime reporter for the Herald Review, Terri Neff. Terri, thanks for joining us.
Sure.
So this is a first installment of what we hope will be a very popular and long-lasting series of true crime in Cochise County, whether it's cold cases, unsolved cases, and even cases that are fresh and in the news pages these days as we speak. So Terri you picked out an interesting first one for us to start with, and that would be the case of Francisco Ruben Parra. Tell us a little bit about the background on that, if you could.
Sure. So Francisco Parra, his brother and a friend, were accused in 2013 of kidnapping, torture, and trying to ransom a Douglas area businessman for $1 million. The whole thing fell apart very quickly. And unfortunately, Mr. Parra never came to justice yet.
Because there was a trial, so he was brought. And then tell us what happened at the end.
Sure. So in December of 2014, Mr. Parra had been coming to his trial all along. They got to the night before the jury was going to start deliberating. The judge, Judge Wallace Hoggett, needed to speak with the attorneys, go over some final jury instructions, and he sent the jury home. And he sent Mr. Parra home. Mr. Parra was out on a $250,000 bond. He'd been doing really good for the 20 months that he'd been out of custody after his arrest. And the next morning, Mr. Parra didn't show up at court.
So I understand there's a lot of speculation about what might have happened to him. Some people think
Sure.
he's dead. Maybe some people think he's on the lam. Before we get to that, those are all possibilities, and I'm sure there's many more. Why don't we go back to the beginning now that we've kind of established where we're at today? But let's start at the beginning. What is the crime exactly that they're accused of committing?
Sure. So Mr. Parra, the specifically Francisco Parra, was at a residence outside of the Douglas area near Pertoville. He was meeting with Diego Morales, and then these two masked men break in. They allegedly take Mr. Morales hostage, tie him up, beat him up a little bit, supposedly threaten torture. But it never got to the point of actually getting any ransom because Mr. Morales mysteriously was able to escape despite the fact that there's these three men in the home with him. He gets out, he contacts police. Mr. Parra is questioned, and he says, hey, I was just an innocent victim myself. The Cochise County Sheriff's Office very quickly realized that didn't quite fit together. So they arrested Francisco Parra, Eric Parra, and a gentleman named Gabriel Owen.
Okay. So I don't know if you have any details on that, but how did the old man, how did he get away from?
Well, we don't really have a lot of the details on that. There's a lot of suspicion as to whether or not this was really a kidnapping incident, or was this possibly something where someone in the Morales family was working with the other three to try to get some money from the Morales family.
So this would be like one of those situations where you have
a victim who's maybe not necessarily a victim.
Right, exactly. That's been done many times in fiction and in real life, obviously. Okay, so December 2014, Francisco Parra on trial.
Yep.
Tell us a little bit about how the trial's going.
Sure. So at that point, all of the state's witnesses had already been, they've already testified. It's been announced to Judge Hoggett that Mr. Parra is not going to testify in his own defense. And so all they need to do is closing arguments, and the jury's going to start deliberating. They didn't get to that point, though, because that next morning, Mr. Parra wasn't there. It took some time. They finally figured out what they were going to do, and they went through with the rest of the trial. And he was convicted of 7 very serious felonies. And you can be tried in Arizona in absentia. And so he had also been warned numerous times. Every time court got done for the day, Judge Hoggett would notify Mr. Parra, remember, you need to be here tomorrow at 9 o'clock. If not, we're going to go ahead without you. And that's what they did. They went ahead without him.
Okay, so he doesn't show up, and then what happens?
Sure. So there was a $250,000 bond that had been put up to secure Mr. Parra's release from prison or from jail. And the Cochise County Attorney's Office very quickly filed a petition to have that money forfeited. And $250,000 is a lot of money to have come into the court right away. That's where it goes, into the court's general fund. So Linda Holyfield, she was the bond writer. She came into Judge Hoggett. She pled to please don't don't forfeit this money. And we learned during that whole hearing, she had not gotten all of the collateral she should have gotten for that $250,000. So she was going to be on the hook for the majority of that. Judge Hoggett went ahead and he did order that it would be forfeited. But he agreed if she came up with $100,000 up front, she could then make payments. And it took her until early 2016 finally to make the final payment.
Wow. So what, in the meantime, what was happening with the trial?
Sure. So the jury had come back in December 2014 with their guilty verdicts. The next phase would have been a aggravation factors phase. That's a mini trial where the jury is supposed to decide, were there certain aggravating factors in this? Were there accomplices? Was there particularly gruesome physical or emotional harm? Was it done for financial benefit? And that got delayed. That actually did not happen for several months until late 2015. By then, they had to bring in a whole new jury just to do that little mini trial. Aggravating factors are only relevant for the judge. It deals with sentencing. Should a person get mitigation? Should they get an aggravated sentence? So that has been holding out there since 2015. They cannot sentence Mr. Parra without him being present.
So when he disappeared from his trial, was there much of an investigation from the local police? Did they have some theories or some leads?
So there were a lot of different competing theories. One is that he voluntarily left the area, possibly to Tucson where he had friends and family, possibly going into Mexico where he had family. There was also some suspicion that perhaps he had been tricked into leaving, or perhaps even maybe taken as retribution for what he had done to Mr. Morales. Remember, though, he was facing about 100 years in prison if he was convicted, and he'd been out for 20 months. So why suddenly, the night before the jury's going to start deliberating, does he go out, and that's when he takes off?
Well, can we back up a little bit to the Morales? Tell us a little bit about the Morales connections. Who are these people, and how did they have?
So the Morales family had a lot of business, import-export businesses, owned a lot of property outside the Douglas area. And it was probably seen as an easy mark to go after a family member there. There's never really been anything clear-cut about whether cartel was involved or simply it was just a very well-to-do family.
And so this is just a crime completely botched, by probably ill-planned and botched.
Correct. I mean, you're in a house. There's 3 men. They're all pretty solid guys, and your alleged victim is just able to escape. It's kind of suspicious.
And 100 years seems like a lot for a kidnapping without a fatality.
Right. So it's very interesting because Eric Parra, the brother, and Gabriel Owen, the friend, they both very quickly took plea deals. They agreed to plead guilty to attempted kidnapping. They got 10-year prison sentences. And so they're already out. They got out, both of them, a few years ago. But because Francisco insisted on going to trial, each one of his 7 convictions could, at the judge's discretion, be sentenced consecutive or back-to-back, and thus a possible 100 years.
Okay, so we're coming up on almost 10 years since his disappearance. Is anybody out there looking for him? Is this on anybody's radar? It's
not really, and here's why, Matt. When the bail bonds lady was issued or ordered to pay the $250,000 to the court, it's done. That's not refundable to her. He could have shown up the day after she made the final payment, and the money's just, she's out. So neither the bail bonds agent or any company is out there looking for her or for Mr. Parra. The other difficulty is there's been a lot of crimes in the last decade. So the Cochise County Sheriff's Office is not out looking for him. If he shows up somewhere, his fingerprints come up when he's trying to cross the border, hypothetically, something like that. Yeah, the warrant is still out there. We know that's still there. He would be held without bond. So it's not like he can post bond and get out again. He would actually be transferred to the Cochise County Sheriff's Office. But what's very interesting is Miss Holyfield, the bail bonds agent. This whole incident wrecked her personally. It wrecked her professionally. She is adamant that she wants to find whatever happened to Francisco Parra. She believes he is still alive. She knows that there are other people in the judicial system who have suggested that maybe he got tricked into going to Mexico and then was murdered in retaliation for what he did to the Morales family. One attorney told me that he heard very specifically that Francisco Parra was killed within 72 hours and that his body was buried in a 55-gallon drum. And it's an attorney who does not take part in a lot of rumors. So that's honestly what he thought. If Francisco Parra is still alive, Matt, somebody has been helping him, obviously, for almost a decade. And for Linda Holyfield, she wants to see those people brought to justice.
Even though she can't get the money back that she lost in the forfeiture. And I guess a question about that from the point of view of the bail bonds. So let's say, just for argument's sake, you had someone who didn't show up to trial and they were murdered, their body was found that next day.
Sure.
Would they still be on the hook for the
No.
remaining? Okay.
No. If a dead body had ever been found before the bail revocation was done, the bail bond company would have been off the hook.
And is there any indication that the family of Parra has filed any court documents?
So one thing that you would think, in Arizona, it's very easy to apply to have somebody declared deceased. It's a 5-year waiting period from when they're last been seen. Nobody in Mr. Parra's family has filed anything. Now, one reason for that possibly is the fact that probably would trigger the Cochise County Sheriff's Office having a renewed reason to really look into what's been happening the last several years. So it potentially brings the Parra family into maybe having criminal charges filed against them. If it's found that maybe he's dead now, but at some point early on, somebody was helping him.
And then back to the trial, there was some speculation during it, apparently, that the defense attorney for Parra might have known that his client was going to not show up.
Yeah, so this is, this case, Matt, has so many twists and turns. One of the things that's very crazy is Wendell Hughes was contracted by Cochise County to be the trial attorney for Mr. Parra. Mr. Hughes was known to have a long history of very severe mental health issues. At one point, a few years before this, the SWAT team in a northern county had to go into his office and take him out. He was hospitalized for, like I said, severe mental health issues. So one of the questions, the day that it was reported that Mr. Parra was not in court, Mr. Hughes reacted somewhat abnormally, a way that people in the judicial system thought was odd. So it could simply be that stress brought on this reaction. It could be that he knew something but had to protect his client's best interests and so had difficulty being forthcoming with the court. Or it could be too that maybe he had been threatened himself, and we don't know. Mr. Hughes died several years back, so we really never got a chance to ask him what all he knew.
Fascinating. So what would happen in maybe the slim chance that Parra were taken into custody again? What would happen?
Sure. So he would be taken into custody on the warrant from 2014. He would be held without bond at the Cochise County jail. He would have to come into court. He'd get a review hearing, and then within 30 days, he would get sentenced. One of the very bizarre twists in this whole thing is Judge Hoggett was the judge in Cochise County Superior Court Division 3. That is the division that this case is still assigned to. If Mr. Parra comes back into the court system. Division 3 is now presided over by Judge David Thorne. Judge Thorne would have to recuse himself from hearing this because he is married to Lori Zucco, who was the prosecutor in Mr. Parra's case in 2013-14.
And there'd be no sort of making an exception for all the extravagant circumstances behind this.
Absolutely not. It would have to go into a different division.
Wow. Well, I guess we'll have to see about that. But so, I mean, it's probably a pretty long shot by now. But if anyone has any information about Parra's whereabouts, what can they do to help?
Absolutely. The sheriff's office, 520-432-9500, would love to know. Anything, even if it's something for 7, 8, 9 years ago, anything that could perhaps give them a lead to where he's been.
Okay. Well, fantastic. I think we're off to a great start here with True Crime Cochise. Hope you guys enjoy it. He's going to keep getting better. And if you know about any crimes and any outstanding cold cases, anything like that you have questions about or think might be interesting, feel free to shoot me an email at editor@myheraldreview.com or Terri Jo at terrijo.neff@myheraldreview.com. Please let us know your thoughts and any ideas you have going forward. Terri Jo, thank you so much for your time. We'll do this again soon.
I'm looking forward to this series.
All right. Have a great day.